Folks, this is kind of a long, rambling, disjointed video on using the joiner and the table saw and the planer to deal with wood movement. And as always, for good advice, honest opinions, and discounts, contact me. And guys, I want to share something with you that happened to me some years ago. I was a young woodworker just starting off, and I wanted to build a dining room table that we needed. So I went down to the lumber store. I picked out the nicest looking pine that I could find, and I was very excited to build this table. And the boards were basically they were 1x8s and 1x10s, if I remember right. Anyway, I built the table. I joined it all up. I was very proud of it, and it looked great. My wife loved it. Until about 2 months later, and she said, you know, I think there's something wrong with that table. And I said, what do you mean? What can be wrong with it? And she said, well, look at it. And I looked at it, guys, and there was such a curve in that tabletop that you could have spilled an entire pot of coffee in the middle of it, and none of it would have drained off. So I thought, well, this isn't going to work. So I thought, well, what can I do here? I figure, you know, if wood can bend one way, it can bend the other way. Now remember, I was young and inexperienced and didn't know about wood movement. One of the great lessons we woodworkers learn. So anyway, I took this table and I turned it upside down. I put all the weights I could find around to flatten it back down. And then I glued and screwed 2x4s underneath it on edge. So imagine 2x4s on edge. Well, the boards, of course, were looking sort of like this. And if you multiply that over the width of 3 or 4 feet, you can see what a big curve that would be. So anyway, I flattened it down, and sure enough, it was nice and flat. I thought we were good to go. Well, another month went by or so, and suddenly in the middle of the night, there was this loud crack, and it sounded like I don't know what, but something that brought me awake. And I went investigating. Well, what had happened is the force of that wood bending actually pulled the 2x4s into a curve until everything just kind of snapped, and there was great big cracks down the middle of the table. Anyway, it just didn't work out all that well. Well, since then I've learned a lot about wood movement and how critical it is. So that's a lot of what I want to talk to you about here today. When you get your wood, a lot of times it'll be flat when you buy it. I don't think you would deliberately buy a board that looks like this, but you get it home and the change in the ambient humidity will cause it to cup like that. Now, a couple of things. Guys, if you have a planer, that's great, but it's not going to solve this particular issue. What a planer will do, it has big heavy rollers, and it'll squash that board flat, so it'll lay flat, but as it goes through there, it'll make it parallel in thickness, but when it pops out the other side, it's still going to cup. It'll spring back into that cup form, so that's really not going to do it. What we really have to do is flatten one side on a joiner and then take it through the planer to make it parallel, and then it works out just fine. Now, I've had a lot of people say, well, why doesn't Shopsmith make a 6-inch wide joiner? There's actually a very good reason for that, and I used to think that as well, but here's the reason, guys. If I took this board, and this is 5.5 inches wide, and I flattened it on a joiner, well, you can see what would happen. I would lose the entire bottom section of this, depending on how much curve is in it, and then I would lose these corners on top. So now my board is starting to shrink in this direction, and that's not going to be good. Well, the other problem is kind of what I discussed with that table, which is that a wider board will tend to recup. So what I do now, and I have done this for many years, I just carefully cut everything down to about 3.5 inches. I flatten it on a joiner. I joint my edges up so they look fine. Everything's parallel and square. Run it through the planer between those steps, and everything comes out fine. So that's what we're going to talk about here a little bit more today, how you can make sure that your projects are going to look as good 25 or 50 years from now as the day you built them. You know, guys, in the process of making this video, I've come to some realizations that I want to share with you, and I'll talk more about that at the end of this video. But in some ways, I'm going to contradict what I'm saying here, and you'll understand why when you see at the very end. This is a table that I was talking about. You can see how far off it is. The other thing you'll hear a lot, folks, and I know that I have, but maybe even read this in a book that says, well, if your boards are tending to cup that way, to alternate the grain, put the grain up on one and down on the other. Well, if you think about that, what that really is going to do is make a tabletop that's corrugated, and it's probably not what we're after. So we have to look at a better solution than that. Guys, I find in my own woodworking that the quality of my work is highly dependent upon the quality of my reference tools. And a reference tool, I just mean anything I use for measuring or marking. And the other thing that I like to make sure that I have is plenty of light. I just counted the lights in my shop. I think I have 46 fluorescent bulbs and then all kinds of task or spotlighting around as well. To me it's cheerful, but it helps me just see better and work better as well. Using a good quality square like this one is made by Bridge City Toolworks, and having a good light, and that light is so important, guys. I love that light. I've had that for probably 25 years, and that's something I got from Shopsmith. It allows me to put the light anywhere that I want to, and you'll notice that it never gets hot. I can handle the light and don't ever have to worry about burning myself. So I put the light where I can see, put the square up against it, do my adjustments, I'm good to go. And folks, again, you can see how curved this board is, how cupped it is, and believe me, it wasn't that way when I bought it. So we are going to talk about how to deal with that issue. Now this is a 1x6, so it's 5.5 inches wide, and again, you can see how much cup there is in it. If I took off all that on a joiner and then took off the other side on the planer, you can tell I would lose an awful lot of wood, and I wouldn't have very much left to work with. So what I want to do is set up and rip this. I'm going to rip it approximately in half, and it doesn't have to be exact. I'll try to match up the grain the best that I can, and when you do this, you put it all back together, glue it up. It's going to look fine, and it's going to stay flat for you. Now, on a rip cut, I'm not real meticulous about making sure this is squared up. On a cross cut, I am. The reason for that, on a rip cut, I know that I'm going to be running it through the joiner. So as long as my joiner is square, my finished cut will be square. That's and guys, when you put this guard in place, let me show you this. It's really kind of surprised me over the years. I've heard people say a guard is hard to work with. My best guess is people are just passing on something that they've heard from somebody else, or they're referring to the early guards on the old 500. With the 510 and 520, here's what I do. Here's the back of the guard here. I grab it like this with my right hand, thumb and finger. On the other side, my fingers are gripping it like so. So now, what I'm going to do is just reach back, slide it all the way down and in until it stops, and then tighten the locking knob on the guard. Now, one thing you want to check for here, guys, you want to make sure that that blade is centered to the splitter here, or the splitter to the blade. And there's another video that I have that shows how to do that. But if that splitter is not centered to the blade, when you're making a cut, the piece of wood's going to hang up on the splitter. But I wouldn't work without a splitter in a guard, personally. 50 years of woodworking, still got them all. Now, if your project requires more precision than what I just showed you, this is something that's pretty nice. It's called, machinists call it a 1-2-3 block for pretty obvious reasons. It is 1 inch thick, 2 inches wide, 3 inches long, and you can just use this as a manual tool to set distances for any setup, really. And obviously there's going to be times when you have different sizes than that, so they also include these little spacers here, and they come in 3/4, ½ inch, 1/4 inch, 1/8, and 1/16. This comes from Veritas, and I believe I got these at Lee Valley, but they're really nice if you're doing precise stuff. In this case, if I were making this setup, I would use my 2 inch plus my 3/4 inch, and that's going to get me just about where I want to be. And you can probably see here that that setup is just a hair off. So there we go. Just want to have that very light contact on a tooth that faces towards the fence. Okay, I always want to make sure that we're taking our measurements on the tooth that faces into the fence. So comes in a nice little carrying case. I don't work for Veritas. So anyway, it works good. And consistency is the key here, guys. You want to make sure that whatever we're doing, that we're consistent. You know, I could be off by a 1/64 of an inch on, let's say, the width of all my cabinet frames, as long as they're all off a 1/64. But if one's off and one's not off, then I've got problems. In this setup, I'm going to be using the joiner and the table saw at the same time. I could either just pick the 3450, which I know from previous experience that that's about the right speed for sawing, or I could go to my chart. Let me show you how the chart works. Hit the chart button here, hit confirm. That means I'm picking the chart. Now as I go up and down here, you're going to notice that these are alphabetical. So I'm going to go backwards. I guess I'm going forwards here. There we go. So then we'll hit confirm, and as you see it says 3450. So now here's the important thing on this, guys. I had a guy call me up, and he bought a Power Pro, and he was unhappy. And I was real surprised at that, because that's, of the hundreds and hundreds of people that I've helped get involved in his Power Pro, I think his was the only complaint. And he said, I didn't like the way I had to turn it on and off all the time. I turned the button off and it took too long. Well, after talking to him, what I discovered he was doing, he was turning the on and off switch and using that. Well, I understand that, because that's what we're used to doing with the old system. But with the Power Pro, what you want to do is leave that in the on position all the time. I mean, you can turn it off, it doesn't hurt anything. But if you turn it in the off position, you're going to have to go through that restart on the computer, and that would be frustrating. So what you do, leave that in the on position, then when you're ready to go, you hit on, and it'll say confirm. What is reading here, it says general sawing forward 3450. Okay, then we hit confirm. Okay, I just turned it off. Let me turn it on one more time. So what I'm going to do, if I'm doing a lot of sawing, which is pretty common, I'll hit on, confirm. That's it. One more time. One more time. Again, guys, nothing fancy here. Nothing, it takes, I think, less time than it did to turn the speed dial up and down on the old machine. Hit on. It'll ask you if that's what you want. Hit confirm. All right. Okay, guys, this is my safety portion, and there may be more. I've had people say to me that I almost seem angry when people aren't safe, like I take it personally. And I guess in a way I do, guys. Every time somebody gets hurt on a power tool because they were doing something silly, that's one more time that a mother is not going to let her son or daughter get involved in woodworking. That's one more time that a wife will say to her husband, "Oh no, we're not going to let you get into those kind of things." And it just hurts everybody, really. When somebody gets hurt, everybody gets hurt. So guys, use your push blocks, use your push sticks, use your feather boards as you see here, and you shouldn't get hurt, and everything will be fine. Now you see here there's a gap in these two boards, and when I run it to the joiner, that will take care of that. And that just tells me that maybe something was a little bit off on the table saw setup. I like to use a triangular marking system. It's real simple. You just put a triangle across there for one joint. If you're doing another one, you can just put another line right next to it. And guys, what I've found is when you rip your boards down and you put them back together, the place where you made the cut isn't necessarily the place that you want to put the boards back together. You would think that's going to be the best match, but just play with them a little bit and see what the best look is. And sometimes you can hide a bad spot by turning that underneath, and that works great. But here what we're really fighting, the reason we've got that gap is because that board was cupped so bad. Now here you can see how much wood we would lose if we took off through the joiner only and then through the planer. Now when setting up the joiner, this one is really critical. We want to be absolutely sure that that fence is square to the joiner table, and I always check it on the in-feed side because that's really where our reference point is. Again, have good lights, have a good square, and it's easy to set up. You can set a stop on your Shopsmith joiner to return to this position, but I'm probably going to go ahead and check it with a square anyway, just to be sure. This one really needs to be right. It's not hard to do, but it'll make a big difference in your finished projects. And folks, you don't have to spend a lot of money to get a good square. This one from Bridge City is probably $50 or $60, but if you get a good machinist square, you can get one for, I don't know, $12 or $15. That will do just fine. One thing you do want to have is a base on it like that, something where you can set square in place while you're adjusting the tools. The sequence here is really pretty simple. What we want to do is flatten one surface. I put pencil lines all up and down it to make sure that I've caught every bit of that surface. I will run that through the joiner to flatten that side. I will use my push blocks for this. Then I will take that side that has been flattened, take that up against the fence and joint the edge. I will flip the board basically end for end at that point, take the flattened side again against the fence. So now I have a board that is flat on one surface and square and flat on and straight on two edges. Then I just take it through the planer to finish it off to make sure that it's parallel in thickness from end to end and edge to edge. So once you've done this once or twice, guys, you'll see there's nothing difficult or complicated about it. One thing I like to point out, that there's an angle to these push blocks, and you want to put the angle towards you. It'll just let you control the board better. And when you're doing your jointing work, it's a good idea to start with your left foot forward and don't stand too far back, because when you finish that cut up, you may find yourself a little out of balance. So by starting with my left foot forward, I can go ahead and clean that board up and do it safely and have all the control in the world. And folks, when I teach classes, one of the things I really emphasize is the importance of where you stand. You want to have a stance where your feet are spread apart and you're comfortable, you're balanced. You notice in this shot, I am parallel, or my feet are parallel to the joiner. I don't want to stand back behind the joiner. That would be uncomfortable, and I might have to move my feet in the middle of it. Notice that there's nothing on the floor that I can trip over. So make sure you take care of all that before you start your cuts. Once you've done a few of these, it'll get to be second nature. You'll notice in the table saw cuts, on the rip cuts especially, I lean my belly right up against the saw table, and I lean my leg, usually my left leg, up against the accessory shelf. So I'm in close, and it just puts me in a better balanced position. I think it's safer. I think it's better accuracy if you do it that way. And as always, guys, make sure that you're wearing your safety glasses. Make sure that you're wearing hearing protection, that your sleeves are rolled up, that you don't have any long, loose jewelry. Speaking of jewelry, I had someone question me about wearing my wedding ring while I'm working. And obviously, guys, that's a choice you have to make yourself. But what I've always read, what I've heard from the old timers, and what I've practiced myself is that it's the loose jewelry. And, you know, we guys usually don't have too much of that to worry about. But something as snug as a wedding ring, if that gets caught in something, I'm already way too close, so it's too late to worry about that. But again, use your own judgment on that and your own common sense. One thing, guys, if you do have long hair, pay attention to that. I actually saw somebody get their hair caught in a machine. It was not pretty. And sweatshirts. I wear a lot of sweatshirts, and those ropes that dangle down from the hooded sweatshirts can be terrible. And it's one of those things, at least for me, I don't always think about it, but I've just taken now to taking those completely out of my sweatshirts. I don't really need them. So again, I'm balanced here. I'm sliding forward, pivoting with my body weight forward, and that keeps me in great shape. I've also come to appreciate the fact that I don't have to reach across the joiner and turn the speed down every single time I turn the machine off. And that's just a feature of the new Power Pro headstock. I can just leave it at the speed and hit the button, and I'm good to go. You can begin to see how this is going to come together once I run this through the planer. That should start looking just really, really nice. Guys, I'm going to wrap this up for now, and as I said, I've got another little message after this. Well, guys, I started putting this little video together back in October, and as you can see, it's it's the day before Christmas, and I'm still not finished. So you know, it's a tough thing, and sometimes I shouldn't say it's tough. It's a lot of fun, but you know, when do you say that's good enough and get it posted up on YouTube? One thing about making these videos, I'll tell you, if you've never done it, I had no idea. You know, I figured if you want to make a half-hour video, you figure total of 40 minutes. Turned out a half-hour video is an 8-hour day. So anyway, it is a lot of fun, but anybody that does it will tell you that it takes longer, and of course other things get in the way as well. One of the good things that's getting in the way, and I'm going to post up a new video about this, we are doing a major remodel of the shop, and it's not going to be hugely different as far as the layout or the tools, but the biggest difference is we are covering the concrete floor with a 1/2-inch foam mat that's a wood grain, and I have to give my wife Susan the credit for that, because I sort of fought her on it and said, that's a lot of money, and I'm not sure that's what I want, and on and on and on, but she persevered, and it looks great, and it also feels great. I'm to that stage of life, and maybe some of you guys relate. If I stand on concrete for very long, my legs are screaming, and this new foam is nice. Guys, if it works out the way I think it's going to, I will, as I said, I will definitely post a video on it, and also give you the sources where we got this stuff, but so far so good, and I want to wish everybody a very, very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever your thing is. Just hope you have a happy, safe, peaceful holiday, and a great year in 2014. Thanks for watching this year, and I'm going to continue on with this video and hopefully get it out here in the next 24 hours. Well, folks, I told you I was going to tell you something a little different at the end of this video. You know, I was going to completely redo this table. And then when I started looking at it, I realized even though it's cracked, even though it's warped, even though the finish is no good on it, there's an awful lot of memories associated with this table, and I'm just going to keep it just the way it is.